This is Ground Affected. My name is Brent, and welcome to Stepping in a Dog Turd on the Sidewalk. In this video, I'm going to show you how I painted this robot man. A couple of months ago, I had started building an army for Warhammer 40,000. The army that I chose to build was Space Marines. Yes, I am one of those who chose Space Marines. Not only did I choose Space Marines, but I chose the Ultramarine faction, because I don't give a And since I started doing that, I've not painted a single one of my own personal army figures, not even one. But I did buy some more figures from Games Workshop. And so I ended up buying Chelnath, which is a Kill Team box set that has two teams in it. One of those teams is the Sisters of Battle. The other team is a Tau. Or Ow. That aside, I ended up building a Tau kill team. And yes, I didn't paint them either. But because I had built a Tau kill team, I did look on the internet and found people made wonderful robots for Tau. And so I printed a Crisis suit. My inspiration for painting this guy was Bumblebee. Instantly, of course, I saw a robot and I thought, this must be a Transformer. He does not transform, but he is super cool, and I will show you how I painted him in this video. So for this project, I was painting him yellow, and already I thought the best way to go about that is start with the Zenithal highlight. It's going to go over white a lot better than it would go over black, so to make my life easier, I started with a Zenithal. Zenithal is a black with a white sprayed over the top from the source of the light direction. For the first layer of color, I'm going to go with Demonic Yellow, which is an airbrush paint from Army Painter. I sprayed this all over the model and made sure that that was good and properly dry. I then took Imp Yellow and I used that as a highlight directly on the top portions of the model only. Using contrast Iyanden Yellow, I then sprayed that from the bottom of the model. This is going into all the recesses and dark areas that would be in shadow on the bottom of the model. It is a slightly orangish kind of color, which is really good for shadows on yellow, specifically if you want something super saturated looking. I then went back with the Imp Yellow over the top just to reinforce the highlights, and you can see that really pays off. I made sure to point this Imp Yellow into the areas that I thought would get the most light on the model. I then did something which may have been a mistake, but I've still worked with it anyway, and I clear coated with a gloss clear the entire model. I did this to seal in the layers underneath, as well as create a barrier for me to add colors over the top and be able to wipe away any excess or mess. I used Vallejo liquid mask and I masked off all the areas that I wanted to remain yellow. As you can notice, there are magnets on this model. This is something I'll show you towards the end of the video, but the model comes from Piper Make stuff, and the entire model is modular. You can change all of the armor on this model, including weapons and everything. Everything comes pre-slotted for magnets. It's absolutely one of the best printed kits that I've put together, and the details are amazing. I used 2 layers of Vallejo mask because I wanted to make sure nothing was coming through. Then using gunmetal from Ammo by Meg, I'm gonna now spray that over all the parts that needed to be metal. I glued the guns onto toothpicks to make it easier to hold, and I sprayed that all with the gunmetal color from Ammo. Then, starting on the body, I sprayed everything, not worrying about where the overspray went because I had masked off everything that I was worried about covering in the first place. Then for the fun part of picking all that mask off, I used multiple tools to do this. Because I had added quite a strong layer of clear gloss underneath, this protected that layer extremely well. And so I was able to go in with my blades and toothpicks and tweezers and everything I could possibly find to pull off the mask that was stuck in all the little creases and crevices on the model. This wasn't too difficult, however I did find out to use a toothpick to get to certain areas and my blade to get into even tighter areas. One of the most satisfying things about using a liquid mask is pulling it off at the end. I really enjoy taking off the mask and seeing what I have created underneath. Now, using a panel line wash from Ammo by Meg, I'm going to start washing some of the parts that needed it. For the guns, I literally just dipped them straight into the bottle and shook off the excess. This gave such a great effect. I did not expect this to work, but because a panel line wash runs off a lot easier, it's super easy to just tap off the excess. I then smothered this all over the metallic pieces that I'd painted earlier. Being careful obviously not to make it too thick so that it would drip everywhere, but just pretty much smothering it everywhere. Now for the base, I used red leather. This is one of my go-to colors for ground and sort of anything earthy, just because the coverage on this paint is super great. So I used this to base coat the entire base, and while that was drying, I came back with an earbud and I wiped off any of the excess wash that I had left on the model, as well as start adding a bit more to the panel lines around the model itself. So you can see me going between a panel line and an earbud and adding the wash into spaces and using the earbud to wipe off sections that I may have used a little bit too much wash. I then took my favorite sandy technical paint, Armageddon Dust from Citadel, and I brushed that onto all the parts that looked like sand on the base. I must admit this isn't as noticeable at the end as I thought it would be, but my brain was happy that I had put sand color on the sand parts. You can kind of see in this clip how the panel wash seems to run through any crevices that you put them in, and this is due to putting down a gloss clear coat before, as well as panel line washes are just like that in the first place. I'm pretty sure panel line washes are based off of an oil and they have some kind of a spirits in them, which is what makes them run so wildly. This is a curse and a blessing at the same time, because that wash can get everywhere. I then used the gunmetal to paint all the vents all across the armor on the body, and I made sure to paint this on every single vent that I could see that was open and accessible for me to get to. Now for something I don't think I've shown in my videos yet. This is a Tamiya weathering set. Essentially, this is basically the same as pigment powders, but it's been compressed, so you pick up slightly less of it and you use kind of a makeup brush to put this on. I'm going to use the silver to just highlight all the areas of the metallic parts on the robot. And as you can see, that creates a super cool contrast. Going back to the base, I'm going to paint some of the metallic parts that are on this base. I'm also going to use that metallic paint to make it look like the feet are slightly chipped. Now for another thing that I absolutely love doing to most of my models, and this is using these fake little tufts of grass that you can stick wherever you want. You don't have to use any special applicator, you just stick them down and they look great. And how can you call any model complete unless you've used pigment powders to make sure that base is as dirty and dusty as they can come? I really enjoy the effects that this pigment powder gives. It just brings everything together so well and increases the level of realism, even if you're not going for realism. It just brings the piece together. Going back into the robot boy, I'm going to start to paint some of the smaller details, like for example his eye and the little eyeball viewer thing that's next to his eye. I paint those grey at first with a white highlight, and then I put a technical color over the top, which is basically fluorescent colors, and I painted the little button light things just underneath his eye. I must say, this model was one of my favorite models to paint over the last few months. I really enjoyed the way that Piper Makes had sculpted everything to make sure that there was places for magnets. I love the fact that these things come on and off, and I could change them if I really wanted to, but I'm extremely happy with how the model looks as it is. And in fact, I'm probably gonna build a Tau army. Ow army, because this just looks really epic, and I think I'm going to probably need a lot more big robot boys to bolster that army up in the future. I will leave a link for Piper Make stuff in the description below. Make sure to check him out, and if you like his models, perhaps consider joining his Patreon. Speaking of Patreons, don't forget, I too have a Patreon, and in that Patreon, I do nothing. But I do give you access to the Discord where all of our friends discuss printing, painting, techniques, everything you can think about with making stuff like this. If you are interested in being part of that community, as well as supporting the channel and the videos that I make, please make sure to check out my Patreon. And now is a good time for me to thank the new patron that joined this week, George Starling. Thank you so much for your support. It means so much to me in this channel and helps me undeniably. Is that a word? It helps me. Thank you very much. And yes, I have waited to the end of the video to ask you to please like the video and consider subscribing. Every bit of interaction you have with my videos helps to push it further out to more people. The more views we get, the more people we can help learning how to paint and print models as cool as this. And as you know, there is only one thing we have left to do when we get to this part of the video. Either you liked it or you didn't, and if you didn't, just click dislike and f*** off. And now I'm gonna have to paint a new bloody robot.